Hi, everybody. Alicia, I can't hear you. I don't know if you're talking to me.
Yeah, I was just saying hi. Sorry, I entered muted. I didn't realize that. I was just saying, I think this is the first time we've heard each other's voices, so it's kind of nice to meet you this way.
Yeah, you too. How are you all doing today?
Good. It's kind of like a dreary day.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw we're supposed to have like a tornado watch or something later today.
Yeah, I saw
So
that the warning came through on my phone. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. We just can't get out of this winter without like all these natural disasters, right? Between the ice storm and then the tornado watch and the power outages.
Yeah. Ann Arbor.
Yeah. Morning, Victoria.
All right, well, I'll be back in just a minute. We'll probably start a minute or two late because there are usually stragglers coming in, but
Yeah.
I'll kick us off in like around 12 or 12:01.
Sounds good.
Just a couple minutes.
Hey, Donna, good morning.
Oh, I was muted, sorry.
So we asked Abby to make you a co-host. So you should see that in case, in case you need to do anything on the mural board.
If I have to do anything on the mural board, it is not going to be pretty.
It's gonna be okay. You have the power. You have the power.
I have the power, I don't have the brain.
I believe in you. Hey, Natalie.
I went to my massage and she said my whole body is like she could feel a change, that my whole body is tight, which she thinks is because my blood pressure medicine.
Ooh. Was she able to make some progress with you then, or?
She was, but
Yeah.
she said double, like I always drink a lot of water. She said actually up it because it could be making my whole body, all my stuff tense because I don't have enough water.
Are you feeling dehydrated?
No.
No.
but it is interesting.
Mm. Did you feel better afterwards? I know sometimes it's like the next day is when you feel a
Yeah,
difference.
I always
You
feel a
can
little
feel it.
better afterwards, so we'll see.
I'm glad
It's a
you were able to do it this morning. Thanks for rearranging everything. Appreciate it.
I'm happy she could do it. And
Yeah.
I'm always amazed by um, the things about medicine that you just don't realize. And I think that's something to carry forward when we're thinking about studies like this. You know, that if you get put on a medication that you're not, if it's a pain medicine or whatever it is, there are other implications that you don't think about.
Mhm.
You're solving one problem and creating another, as is.
Yeah. You can have kind of a runaway effect, right? Like then you're just playing whack-a-mole with side effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully we get through this whole thing without a tornado blowing through.
That's what Abby was saying.
You
Mhm.
know,
I just got an email from our architecture person who's like, be on the lookout, everybody.
Mhm.
We'll give it just another minute or two, and then I think we can go ahead and get started.
That sounds good. And then Dr. Gonzalez looks like he's coming from back-to-back meetings, so he might slide in a little bit late and need that co-host
Co-host.
privilege.
Yeah.
But we can absolutely start on the first few things without him.
Hey, HomeLab.
hey,
Hi, Bree. Good seeing you.
Yeah, it's good seeing you. Deep in grant writing life. It's always wonderful to. How you doing, Kara?
Hi, I'm doing all right.
Hi, Victoria. Hi, Caitlin. We're hoping this session will help drum up more interest for our simulation later this. Whenever we'll get that scheduled. We're working on it.
Should we wait a couple more minutes, or should we go ahead and?
No, we should definitely wait a couple minutes. So
Okay.
they're gonna need.
And then Bree, I was telling Abby, Rich is coming to this, but he's got, back-to-backs this morning.
No problem.
So he gave us the go-ahead to start without him if we reach the point where we're ready to do that.
Okay.
But he is intending to come later.
All right. I'm gonna go knock on the door, Abby, and just kind of make sure there's no, like because the calendar invite still had the room number on it, and so I want to make sure there's nobody there. So, all right, I'll be back.
Thanks everybody for joining us. For those of you who just hopped on, we're gonna wait like 1 more minute just in case there's anybody who forgot that we're meeting on Zoom, and then we'll get started.
Great, and while we're doing that, I'm gonna test out my share screen, just make sure I got all my ducks in a row, because I am sharing for the group today. Can you guys see this slide? Is that what you see? Okay.
Yes.
All right, well, there's nobody there, so that's at least not where they are. All right, well, I guess we should get started, just given the interest in time. Are we recording already?
Yes, we are.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I probably checked that when I came in. All right. So hello, CSEF. It is my deep pleasure to introduce you to the HomeLab team, who are they're going to tell us all about the work that they do. There are multiple people who have multiple tasks and skills and experience. I first got connected with HomeLab. I can't remember where I was when I heard about y'all, but I came and just visited at some point. I said, I don't know what I want to do here in this space, but it's amazing. I want to figure out something. And then we got MeWe funded, and now we do a half-day training on human-centered design with them in the HomeLab. And so, yeah. So I just today we're gonna, kind of, this is the first of what I hope will be a 2-part training for folks, as they'll kind of set up. Is that you may recall when we had that ice storm was it last month? I don't know. Time is no meaning, but we weren't able to get together for a HomeLab simulation, but we still wanted to have HomeLab come today and tell us about what they're doing and kind of show us what, just kind of help us get oriented to this idea, which is, I think, really central in research around kind of thinking about empathy as it relates to data collection. And I'm gonna let them take it away. So thank you, HomeLab.
That's great. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about design thinking and empathy in data collection and analysis. And just like Bree was saying, there's a couple things that are bringing us together today. The first is a shout out right back to you, Bree. So thank you for being a champion for innovation in experiential learning and simulation. So what we're doing today is a little bit of experiment, and we'd love feedback from you guys about how this experience went for you, what value you found in it. So we're always open to improvement and would like to hear from you guys afterwards. And just like Bree said, yeah, the second thing that's bringing us together is the terrible Michigan weather. So this was originally designed as a debrief session for the HomeLab simulation, and now it is a pre-brief, which is a new word for me. But we are going to go through some concepts extremely fast today. We're just going to get like a little taste for human-centered design. And if you like it, if you're interested, if you want to go deeper with it, I think Abby is still trying to put together that session at the end of May. So just a little plug for that. And then Bree mentioned the U of M HomeLab. This is a picture of it. So this is the space that the simulation would be run in, and this is where I work. It is a fully functional apartment and sometimes a clinic, and it's located at the Institute for Social Research in Ann Arbor. You are going to have a number of facilitators today helping us through a little experiential learning process. So there's me, I'm Alicia Carmichael, and I'm the research process director for HomeLab. There's Richard Gonzalez. He is our director, and he will be joining us a little bit late. And then I'll turn it over to Donna to introduce herself briefly.
Hi there. I'm Donna Walter, and I am the participant engagement specialist, which is a fancy word for I recruit the participants that come through our lab and make sure that they have easy time finding our lab, and then that they are paid and everything on the way out.
And then Natalie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a human environment research specialist at the lab, which is a fancy word for I help with study design and thinking about the participant experience. And I am a PhD student in architecture as well. And I'll pass it on to Paul if you'd like to go.
Hi, yes, I'm Paul Gerd. I also go by she or they. I'm currently a research associate here at the HomeLab, and I'm also an MArch student at Tubman College as well.
Thank you. So all of us today will be helping you through a little bit of an exercise, and Donna is also going to play a special role in something called journey mapping, and we'll get to that. So we have a really packed agenda today. We might in fact not get through all of it, but like I said, this is going to be primarily experiential. So we want to get through a little bit of lecture, a couple slides, just to give you some background on empathic design or empathetic design. And then we want to really get to this thought exercise that we're going to be doing together, have a little discussion about that before we dismiss. So let's talk about our goals for this session. We have 3 of them. So the first is through the lens of design thinking, we want to explore how protocol design choices influence the experience of stakeholders in research. And I've listed 3 possible stakeholders here. There are more, especially depending on what project you're working on. But at least these are the participants themselves, the community that you're engaging with, the investigators, PIs and co-Is, and other research staff who are engaging in the research process. Our second goal is to think about how the first item in this list can impact data analysis, our outcomes, and our interpretation of those outcomes. And the third point I'll let Natalie make, because this is when she added it and thought was important.
So I think thinking through number 1 and 2, it comes down to, well, what choices, should we make, right? And part of today, we're going to talk about some tools to help inform and make decisions about design choices. And we'll do an experiential kind of learning section together, like Alicia was mentioning, to talk about what choices would we make and kind of debrief those with the group.
So really quick, really fast intro to empathetic research design. Sometimes you'll hear empathic research design. We'll use those interchangeably today. And Natalie will walk you through this part.
All right, so what is research design? I threw this slide in here after talking with Rich and talking with Bree about some of the background of those of you in the group. And so I hope this kind of speaks to what you're coming in with today. But when we think about research design, often our brains might go to the first definition, which Alicia, if you click one more time, I think that'll come up. Making decisions about your research study. So this might be things like, your blocking design and the factors that you'll use, or your sample size, or how you want to assign people to groups. And these are all types of things I think that when we hear research design or study design, our brain might go to first, right? And they might change how we approach our data analysis. It might change the types of tests that we run. It might change how we interpret, right, some of the data at the end of the study. But to us in the HomeLab, we want to pose this just as being kind of that outer layer of research design and thinking about there's a whole inner layer that needs to support this, right? And Alicia, you'll click one more. Thank you. So the second one we want to think about when it comes to research design is decisions about your research study that include more kind of the minutia, I guess you could say, but a lot of the interaction with the people who will be in the study. So task design, protocol design, the language you're using when working with participants, different things like that. And we're going to really unpack this today and practice this together. And we'll also talk about some tools that can help, again, make decisions that are empathic decisions that help with representation as we're doing study design. And we also think about this as kind of a continuum in a way, research design, and it's iterative. So you're starting, with that research question or problem. And at the beginning, you want to try to use these tools to be open and to create lots of options, right? And so we always try to do this in the sense of, let's put everything out there on the table that we can and test it before we kind of rule anything out. So you want to just focus on being open, and we'll do this today. We'll do a lot of the exploratory work today before coming into the closing and making decisions on your different research protocols. So some different tools I'm alluding to. So the question is, how might we consider the experience of participants, investigators, and research staff when we approach research design? We want to think about this in two ways. One is, how do we encourage empathy in this process? And empathy is important because we don't often share the same experiences that a participant might share. We might not have the same backgrounds. All our participants might have different motivations for being there. Same with our research staff, same with the investigators, right? Everyone's coming with some different goals for their involvement in the study. And so empathy is a really important key to that. And also representation, right? So making sure that you're including voices that are not your own in your research team and in that design process. And so how do we do that? First, increasing the diversity of staffing on your research team is a really important point, and I think that can't be replaced by anything else. But number two is using services that also offer community engagement workshops and touch points. And I wanted to do a shout out to some services that are here at Michigan, offered by MISHAR. They do something called Community Engagement Studios, which is a great way to kind of get a group of your participants in the room and work with them through an aspect of your study. Maybe you want to work through a recruitment protocol, and you can do that in some type of structured community engagement workshop. And then lastly, we'll talk about this more, but using something called a boundary object as a way to relate to another person, and using tools that come from the field of human-centered design. So we'll dive into those a little bit later. And then I'm going to hand this off to Rich. I think, Rich, you are on the call, so welcome. And the question for you is, why is this type of research design important to analysts, data scientists, statisticians, anybody else?
Hi, I'll do a brief introduction. I'm Rich Gonzalez. I direct the Biosocial Methods Collaborative, which houses the HomeLab. I'm trained as an experimental social psychologist, and I also I'm an applied statistician, so I have appointments in both psychology and the statistics department. And so a lot of times when we do data analysis, especially secondary data analysis, we treat the data as columns of numbers. And we try to, look at the design of the study in terms of pattern matching. Is this a case control study? Is it a panel study, right? We try to match the particular design, and we want to know what's the outcome variable or the predictors, control variables, confounders, et cetera. And we don't think a lot about the design of the study. So that's kind of what this exercise today is about, is to sort of show you how some of these decisions that were made by the people who collected the data very early on can have impact on how you interpret the analyses, and maybe help you understand some of the heterogeneity that you might be observing in your analyses, or it might get you thinking about different kinds of confounders and control variables you might want to include in analyses. So clearly, if the objective is sort of primarily secondary data analysis, there's an important aspect that tends to get overlooked, which are the details we're going to cover in today's exercises. But more importantly, I think this is a general plug to get people that are doing data analysis involved early in the process. All too often, the data analyst is brought in at the end of the project after it's been collected, saying, okay, here are the data, it's your turn now. And had the data analyst been involved earlier in the process, such as these decisions that we're talking about today, it might lead to the opportunity for different kinds of data analyses, simplifying the data analytic procedures that have to happen later. Have the data analyst been able to make contributions earlier in the design process? So also keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through these exercises. So, does it go back to you, Natalie, or?
Yep, awesome, thank you. And I'm actually going to hand this now to Alicia to dive into some details about the tools we can use.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep this real brief, but we're going to talk about tools for empathetic research design. And I'm going to come back to that concept of the boundary object that Natalie talked about. So a boundary object is really just a fancy way of saying something that can act as a bridge between different social worlds, between different communities. And here the communities we're talking about are researchers and participants. And you probably have had this experience if you're trying to explain your research to your friends or family. It's really like you're speaking a different language. And sometimes you're even using the same words, but it becomes obvious in the conversation that you really mean different things. So designers have developed ways of bridging that difference in communication, and they call these things boundary objects. So listed here is a little toolkit of different boundary objects that HomeLab has encountered over time and utilized to different extents. These are really pilfered from a wide variety of disciplines, and those disciplines might not even recognize them as boundary objects, but we're gonna put a flag in it and say we think that these are all different kinds of boundary objects that help you connect with your different stakeholders in a research project. And the one I've highlighted here is journey mapping. And the reason for that is we're actually going to practice a little journey mapping today as part of our exercise, but the rest of them are listed here in case you ever want to check them out. A lot of these are available on a website that I'll list at the end. And then we're going to jump right into our thought experiment. So this is the end of slides for today. We don't have to look at any more Google slides. We are going to jump into a different space called Miro. And I'm going to put this link into the chat and ask you guys to please join me there. So we'll give all of us like a moment to get there. Now, in case you're on mobile or for whatever reason you aren't able to get onto Miro and also kind of be present here, I'm going to continue to share screens so that for those of you who can't get there, we can still have this experience. So I'm over here in Miro. And I'm going to wait for a minute for people to connect. Oh, and it looks like
Alicia, you can throw that in the chat.
yeah, it looks like I sent the link to
Oh,
one person instead of every person. So here we go.
you.
Now it's to every person.
So I got my camera off. I'm eating lunch here.
Yep, so I'm seeing this number climb. So it looks like we have 9, 10, 11-ish people. Great. And then I'm going to use a little trick. I'm going to try to get all of you over to where I am on the board, because you can see the board is pretty good. So how'd that work? Do you guys, are you guys here now? Yeah, great. So welcome to Miro. This is a virtual whiteboard. It's used for collaboration. And it takes a little getting used to. So I'm just going to give you 2 tips on how to navigate if you've never been in Miro or something Miro-like before. So if you use a mouse, here's some instructions. If you use a trackpad, if you use a touch screen, you can read through the instructions that are relevant to you. I'm using a mouse, so I'll demonstrate that. But if you want to move around the board, you can just right click and press, and that will turn it into a hand, and then you're able to drag around. So sorry for causing any nausea, but this is how you can drag around the board. Or you can just click on this arrow tool here, and then that'll turn it kind of permanently into a hand, and then you can use the left mouse button to do that. The other important thing is being able to zoom in and out, because this is a big board and we're going to be moving around on it. So if you happen to have a scroll wheel on your mouse, you can use that to zoom out and in. If you don't have a scroll wheel, you can use the plus and minus signs here at the bottom of the screen to do exactly the same thing. So there you go, panning around the board and zooming in and out. There's another special feature of this board, which is that it has internal links to help us get around. So what's that mean? Sometimes you'll see things that are highlighted in yellow like this. And if you zoom in on it, you'll notice a little blue arrow. And if you click on that arrow, it'll jump you to the next section of the slide that it's indicating. So in this case, the next section of the slide is going to be the vignette. And I see some of you are already there. That's great. So this is going to be our vignette today. This is a totally made up, completely fake, false, pretend study called the Daytona Stress, Pain, and Wellbeing Study. And we're going to have a little design challenge built around it. Oh, yep, watch out, it's going to fly around. So here I can try to lock that for you guys so you can click on it if you want without it flying away from you. So the Daytona Stress, Pain, and Wellbeing Study is a faux prospective randomized control trial, the goal of which is going to be to evaluate 2 different rehabilitation protocols for total shoulder replacement. If you don't know anything about total shoulder replacement, that's okay. The important things are that patients who are getting a total shoulder replacement are typically in a lot of pain, and they have sort of loss of mobility in their shoulder before they get the surgery. And then after the surgery, they are again in a lot of pain, although it might be a different kind of pain. And they have to undergo up to a year of physical therapy in order to kind of increase their mobility and recover from the surgery. This RCT is going to evaluate a standard rehabilitation protocol that's going to involve standard physical therapy and standard pain management with medications versus all of that plus a mindfulness intervention. So why might we need a mindfulness intervention? Why do we think this might be helpful? The reason is that after you've had a total shoulder replacement, some patients are actually hesitant to engage in therapeutic physical activity, such as physical therapy, because they have a lot of pain and because they're afraid that they're going to re-injure themselves. And this can lead to a counterproductive cycle of pain and fear and not moving and more pain and more fear, and even freezing that shoulder to the point where they don't fully recover or they even need an additional surgery. So this mindfulness intervention is supposed to increase people's coping and reduce anxiety and fear around that physical activity over the first 12 months of the recovery period. If we need to hang our hat on some theory, again, this is just a made-up study, but we've got the fear avoidance model over here that is demonstrating how pain and fear can lead to this really negative cycle of more pain and more fear. Down below here, we see a little recruitment flyer. So this is, again, a little mock-up of what a participant might see when they're being recruited into the study. Oh yeah, I didn't lock that one either. So we'll try locking this one so you guys can look at it without it flying away. We don't have to pay too much attention to this today. One of the assumptions we're going to make is that you are not responsible for designing the recruitment for your study, that your participants are coming in, they're already recruited, and they're already consented. So this is something that we will assume is taken care of already. And then I want to zoom out for a second, and I'm going to take us over here to this journey map. Because before we design anything, we want to get to know a little bit more about what it's like to be a patient. So I'm going to turn things over to Donna Walter and Natalie Leonard.
Thank you, Alicia. And I'm going to do this as a role play exercise. So we're going to fly through this journey mapping. Typically, journey mapping might take you 30 minutes to 2 hours if you're doing this in detail with a real participant. Donna and I pre-filled this out together, but we're going to kind of just talk through everything today. So Donna, thank you for being a participant and helping us inform our study that we have coming up. I'm going to take a minute to just talk through with you some of your experiences about your outpatient arm surgery. Would you be able to share just some information about who you were, things you did at the time where you needed arm surgery?
So at the time of my surgery, I was 46. My nest had newly emptied. Children had flown the nest. And so it was an exciting time for my husband and I. Think of all the things we can do now. So we like to backpack and camp and garden and, do a lot of things outdoors. And I actually injured my elbow backing into a slim cabinet door in our camper. And that's what started the journey of the surgery.
And did you know right away that you needed surgery, or walk me through how you got to that point of where you were making that decision?
I actually didn't realize what I had done when I did it. It hurt for quite a long time. We were on vacation and I was just like, well, but over time, it wasn't getting better. So I went to the orthopedic doctor and he took an x-ray and suggested some steroid shots. And we did that for about 8 months. And before he said, the only other option I have for you, and I was wearing a brace too at the time, is to have surgery, but I don't like to do that surgery because we only have an 80% success rate, which was unacceptable to me. His suggestion was to wear the brace for the rest of my life. I'm 46, no thanks. So I found a different surgeon and he did a whole bunch of tests, different tests, EMGs and MRIs and things like that. We did one more round of steroids. That didn't help. And so then he suggested the next step would be surgery.
And after finding that surgeon and making that decision with him, how were you feeling? Were you scared of the surgery? Were you feeling worried that your pain wouldn't go away? You know, any thoughts like that?
I was at this point, after a year of being in pain, I couldn't move my hand without pain in my arm. And I couldn't hold a cup, it would fall out of my hand. I was just ready for surgery at this point. There was no fear because I was just so sick of being in pain all the time. But I did hope that it would be successful. I mean, I was hopeful about that.
Yeah. And so you go through with the surgery and you're at discharge day, right? And you're heading home and you're in that first week home. What were things that you were doing? You know, were you feeling better? Were you able to return to any of your activities?
The first week, I was in a very fat padded cast from my knuckles of my hand all the way to my shoulder. And I was told to basically sit on the couch, don't even wiggle your fingers, walk as little as possible, and just do nothing. And then after a week, I went back and got a hard cast. And I had the hard cast, my arm was at a 135-degree angle in this hard cast for 8 weeks. The cast weighed 13 pounds. So it was quite heavy. I had a sling. And again, I was instructed not to wiggle my fingers as much as possible. It was my dominant arm. So there was a lot of, learning to do things with my left hand. But there was no pain. The pain right after surgery was very different. I knew immediately that the surgery had worked because the particular pain I had was gone, replaced by the pain of surgery. And so the cast was actually like a security blanket to me because it kept me protected when I would bump into things, and it was quite large, so I bumped into things. But I didn't have a lot of pain right after. In the week after, I just took Tylenol basically.
Right. And lastly, could you give me a quick recap of your recovery over the year? Were you seeing PT? What was that like? Just about that.
So I had physical therapy as soon as the cast came off. I went to the PT office 3 times a week. And then I was also instructed to do those exercises 3 times a day, every day. So it was about 4 hours a day, and they said it could be up to a year. They were painful. I will not kid you. I wanted to punch someone in the head a few times. And they were basically, you had to get range of motion back. And you had to get your arm used to doing things like it used to before. And then 4 months into my therapy, though, I re-injured my arm. I put it down into a squishy cushion and it re-injured. And so I ended up back in the cast for 8 more weeks, the hard cast. And then my doctor said, don't do any more therapy. You over-therapied.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Donna, for sharing that experience with us. And I'm going to pass this back to Alicia to introduce
One
our
more
activity.
thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's been 7 years. It took 3 years to get that pain to go away fully, the pain of surgery. It's been 7 years and I still feel a little, just if you touch the scar, a little pain there. But that gives you an idea. It's a long-term proposition.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna and Natalie. And you may notice that Donna did not have the exact surgery that we're talking about for our vignette. But the person who had that surgery wasn't available for today. So Donna very graciously offered to share her experience, and we can make some analogies between the two, although they won't be exact. So thank you, Donna. So let's go on to our design challenge. So this is what you are going to be charged with doing today. So your goal is to design the first research appointment for the day spa study. You can assume that someone else is taking care of participant recruitment and consenting and all those things that need to happen before the first research appointment. So this is the only thing you have to focus on, is the first time that data is really being collected from them. We're going to have some parameters here. Usually there's just a load of these that we have to think about, but we're going to limit it down to 3. So we're going to think about location of that first appointment. We're going to think about the timing of that first appointment in the journey we just talked about. And we're going to think about the order of some different measures and activities that need to be incorporated into that first research appointment. Again, for the sake of time, we're going to fix a couple things for you. So we are going to fix the location. So you're going to be assigned by Natalie to either design that first research appointment for the home, meaning that the researchers are going to visit the participant's home, and we're going to say that this is what the participant's home looks like. Or you're going to be assigned to design that first research appointment as if the participant is going to come visit you in clinic to complete the appointment. And we're going to say that the clinic looks something like this over here. So these are the spaces I want you to imagine that you're working with. There's some other parameters, and you're going to need to make decisions about these. So you're going to think about the timing. So when should this first research visit occur? And you're going to think about the order. Now, this first visit is going to be about an hour long. We're going to do a lot in that hour, but there's only 3 items that I want you to consider today. In this first research appointment, your goal is to deliver intervention training. So you've got to teach the participant how to self-administer the mindfulness intervention, because they've got to do this on their own over and over and over again every day of their participation. We're going to take some physical measures. The only one we're going to talk about is blood pressure. So we've got to take their blood pressure, and we've also got to teach them to take their own blood pressure and record it. And we're going to do one survey measure out of many. And this is a made-up scale called the Preparedness for Recovery Scale. And that's going to look at how ready they are. So how ready did they make their social life? How ready did they make their environment for the recovery period after surgery? So next, let's take a look at your instructions. So we're going to have about 15 minutes to do this. This is my little reminder to start my timer for that. And Natalie's going to break you out into groups. And then you're going to be asked to navigate in Miro to the frame. And this white thing here is a frame with your breakout room number. Meaning if you're in breakout room number 1, you got to go to breakout room number 1 frame. So if you're going there, for example, you'd zoom out and then you'd zoom in to breakout room 1. And so if I look at the large screen here, it's 1, HomeLab, 2, clinic, 3, HomeLab, 4, clinic. So we may not have all that many breakout rooms. We'll see what Natalie does. Once you've navigated there, you need to designate a spokesperson for your group. One of us will accompany you as a coach, and we will scribe for you. And then you just got to dive into your design. So design the protocol together using the questions that's on your frame as a guide. After that, we'll return and discuss some share out questions if there's time. And if you're curious about what those share out questions are, they are over here. And so you're only going to have like a minute to report out. But if you're curious what we're going to ask you, that's what we're going to ask you. So Natalie, I'm going to stop here and let you do your thing.
Thank you. I think I'm just going to make 2 breakout rooms here, Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
And I will go ahead and open these up. All right. And then those of us that are hosts, I'm going to assign you to some rooms. Well, Alicia, I think we had a lot of questions, maybe made fewer decisions, but it sounded like a good discussion.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't have enough information, right? And realizing that you need to seek out more information is part of the design process, right? But in the interest of time, Natalie, would you be willing to guide us through a very quick share out?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and say, Erin, I think you offered to be the spokesperson for the group I was in, which was breakout room 2, and we were assigned the clinic environment.
Yes, I'm looking for our Post-its and stuff, but I'm looking at too many different screens.
I'll let Alicia come navigate over here for you.
Thank you.
Hello, here we go.
So yeah, I guess I'll just share kind of the thought process that we went through. We first were trying to figure out, like, there's the timing question and the order question. We were first trying to kind of figure out, we kind of talked about the order first a little bit because we weren't sure, like, what the blood pressure, what are we trying to measure with the blood pressure? Is that actually a good measure of like, basically, what are we trying to do with the blood pressure? So we were trying to figure out if that should be taken at baseline and sort of when the intervention should happen. Then we found the slide that told us all the details about the survey, what the survey was. And so that helped us figure out the timing, that this really needs to be a pre-op appointment because for what the survey is and the training. So yeah, so I'm looking at our Post-its. We talked about blood pressure, about what the measure was. Yeah, thinking about if things are administered multiple times. And then we talked about, could we combine this appointment with one of the pre-op visits so that they wouldn't have to come in multiple times. And so we had Donna in our group, so we were able to ask, like, how many pre-op appointments did you have and when they were? Because I think we thought that would probably be important too. And so, yeah, thinking about convenience for the patient and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. And Alicia, we can flip over to your spokesperson for your group.
Hi, everybody. This is Kara. So I worked with Bree and Victoria, and we thought through timing and order for training of the intervention in the home and sort of bracketing some of the unknown details around how many times we're going to be able to interact with the patient and appointments and things. We thought it was really important to deliver the training for the intervention after it was known that surgery would be scheduled at some later date. But before the actual operation took place, and perhaps carve out opportunities for several opportunities to be trained. So in the home, we were thinking do the survey first, perhaps at a spot like the kitchen table or where the person felt comfortable, and then moving to a place where they might think about where they would practice mindfulness and do the training there. But we would do the blood pressure before the mindfulness training and then after. And yeah, and then we just thought about also if you have one arm immobilized, you may need practice for taking your own blood pressure and doing that with one arm, and so what that might look like as well. And I think it was the extent of our conversation.
Awesome, thank you. And Alicia, we can go back to those guiding questions there for the end. Cool, so we can open the floor, or I don't know, Rich too, if you have some insight, from thinking about what people are proposing as it comes to data analysis, outcomes, and interpretation. And then if there are thoughts from the groups on your experience, we can share those too. And I think we've got about 5 minutes left in today's session.
Probably go to the groups, and then if there's time, I can say a few things at the end.
Awesome. So how are people feeling about using a boundary object for the very first time to to help this? And I'd love to hear too, if this isn't your first time, right? Some reflections from your other experience with using boundary objects. Has anyone done this before? Has anyone used a journey map before? Used an empathy map before?
This is Kara. I just, to me, what came to mind was like, there's so many opportunities for like different types of analysis and approach to sort of inquiry, whether that's like thinking more about narrative and meaning making around these types of experiences and how that might inform how you develop and implement the intervention. And I've got some construction in my apartment, so I'm going to stop there and mute.
Yeah, well, I think that's awesome to think about narrative and maybe qualitative storytelling, right? And different types of storytelling and how to bring that into your research design. I don't think we ever talk about that. So I think it's really important, you know, especially thinking back about representation, right? And acknowledging that I think empathy only goes a little bit so far, right? So when you have the chance to really engage and talk to your participant populations, how powerful and important that is. Yes, Bree.
I was just, Kara's comment made me think also of like, if the journey map as almost like part of an intervention like this, you know, sort of like when we, you know, we're imagining, you know, we heard from Donna her entire story, but like I'm imagining sort of that first part, you know, and how she went to multiple providers, et cetera. And like there is like a history that is there that for an intervention like mindfulness training seems like it could potentially be helpful, either in terms of, Victoria made the point in our group about this is not an easy intervention to do, you know, and that, you know, is this person sort of ready to do this? And so I think part of, you know, even the idea of using the journey map as a, you know, as a form of data collection, to Kara's point, but like specifically because we're going to be asking people to essentially, you know, reorient themselves to their experience of pain, like through the intervention. And so like understanding what that experience of pain is, you know, may be helpful for us. This might be a useful tool for that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about these early in the process as you're working through your study. You know, I think to your point, Bree, this type of work and engagement can influence what your intervention even is or should be, right? So, you know, being careful that you're not too far down the path, right, before you come and pull on some other narratives and other stories. You know, I think we're doing a study in HomeLab about diabetes language and patient-provider interaction, right? And did a community engagement study with diabetes patients, and you know, learned a lot, right, about developing the intervention video. So just again, some narratives from us, right, about how these can be used, can kind of applied and incorporated into the research design process.
Thanks, Natalie. And it looks like we have about a minute left. Rich, I don't know if you have a comment or a thought for people going forward about how the decisions they made today or the decisions they didn't make today might impact analysis down the road.
That was for me?
That was for you, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just give an example of how we used a journey map years ago, although we didn't call it a journey map back then, but we were involved in a study where we were just kind of using what everyone else was using, the kind of paradigm and protocol, which is to basically assess pre-birth. This was the effect of the birth of a second child into the family and how the second child might have changes in the family dynamics between the two parents and the only child that becomes an older sib now, and so on. And the traditional paradigm had basically looked at prenatal while mom was pregnant with the second, and then had a second time point about a year after the birth. But the journey map made us realize that delaying a whole year after the birth as the second time point was missing a lot of the interesting psychology and effects. that the theories and models that people were trying to test were actually showing or kind of suggesting a lot of action was happening a month after, 4 months after, and so on, after the birth of the second child. So the journey map made us kind of redesign the whole protocol to have multiple time points during that first year of siblinghood. And that led to some very kind of new and surprising findings that we would have completely missed had we just done the standard. This is what everyone else has always done, which is to do a pre-post, prenatal, and then post is about a year after the birth. And then the other kind of, there are many aspects, as people brought up in the discussions, that where this is valuable. I've seen it in ways that make my life easier in data analysis, for instance, in reducing missing data. So Michigan is one of the world centers of how to, methods for dealing with missing data. And we just take missing data as though this is a feature of the data and we know how to work with missing data. But what if we could actually design studies that minimize the amount of attrition and missingness that we have in our data? I mean, that is a much better approach than trying to bring in fancy statistics to solve missing data problems. And we, with knowledge of this kind of empathy kind of mindset, we've been able to have attrition almost be non-existent. So in this example that I gave of the birth of the second child into the family, we had 240 families at time 1. And at the end of the first year, we had 231 families. So we only lost 9. And this was a huge time investment on the families because it involved 4 different home visits and 3 visits to the University of Michigan campus to do a series of assessments. And to only lose 9 families is kind of an amazing feat. And I attribute that success in part to the fact that we were very mindful of the journeys that these families were going through, and we kind of designed the whole protocol to work with that. And families were engaged from the beginning, and they were excited to participate. And this was never seen as a burden or anything where they just sort of said, "Oh, I'm done. I've already done 3 of these visits. I don't want to do any more." That didn't happen. And so it made my life easier at analysis side because I didn't have the kind of massive amounts of attrition that typically is seen in these kinds of studies where you have families of 4 people coming multiple times to the site or sending teams of research assistants to the homes, multiple times during the year.
Thanks, Rich. So I think we're at time. So the last thing I'll say is thank you so much for engaging in this experiential learning. I know we went incredibly fast, and I think we all felt that today. But if you resonate with this, if you're like, wow, that's interesting, I'd really like to go deeper with this, think about coming in May to actually do a run through of this protocol in HomeLab, so we can actually take the decisions that you made today and then test them out, kind of pilot them in HomeLab and refine them. And I'll leave it there. And Bree, can you send us off?
HomeLab, as always, thank you so much. I've learned a lot from this session. I really want to thank everybody for everyone here within CSEP also for taking part in our little kind of beta version of this today. So I really appreciate it. All right, everybody, stay dry. It's looking dark out there. So all right, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.